Now, you will have noticed not so long ago the big battle at 10 Downing Street was between Sue Gray, the then Chief of Staff, hired controversially by Keir Starmer in another of his great mistakes. Should never have hired a civil servant for that kind of a job. Real screw up, that. But anyway, she locked horns with Morgan McSweeney, a very big, powerful influencer in the Labour movement, big mate of Keir Starmer. Basically, in that battle, Morgan McSweeney won, and he is now the Chief of Staff at Downing Street. So you might think now that he's won the war, it's all settling down, all love and harmony. Is it hell? The battle is still raging there, and apparently the new conflict is between Morgan McSweeney and the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner. So let's find out what's going on. Let's talk to, as I say, Robert Taylor, columnist at The Telegraph. Thanks for joining us, Robert.
Hello, Kevin. How are you?
Very well. I mean, I suppose it's no real surprise. I mean, it's called politics, and politicians are always at each other's throats about one thing or another. But this is quite interesting because Angela Rayner, who I think has, well, shall we say, a difficult relationship with Keir Starmer, she has sort of nominated herself as kind of being in charge of what they're calling the devolutionary revolution. She's going to be in charge of the regions. She wants to talk to mayors about devolving more and more power away from Westminster to the regions. Meanwhile, the new Chief of Staff, apparently, Morgan McSweeney, has decided that's his job. And he's holding these secret meetings behind Rayner's back, which she's not invited to. And the atmosphere, apparently, behind that famous front door at number 10 Downing Street is frosty, to say the least.
Yeah, it's another sign that it's a whole lot easier being in opposition. You can say what you like. You're all pulling in the same direction, trying to get into power. When you get into power, it's a whole different ballgame. But what I think we've got here with McSweeney versus Rayner, if you like, in Labour terms, is like the immovable force meeting the irresistible object. Obviously, Angela Rayner needs no introduction. She's got her own mandate. She's elected by the members as deputy leader of Labour, now, of course, deputy prime minister. And as for McSweeney, he's just about the most influential person in the land, apart from possibly Keir Starmer himself, because McSweeney put Keir Starmer where he is today. That really is no exaggeration. He's the #1 power behind the throne in Labour. And when you've got the two up against each other, if it really is like that, then who knows who's going to win? It could be anyone's guess.
Well, past experience would dictate that perhaps Ms Rayner is not in for a happy near future because McSweeney's quite clearly a very good office politician, an office warrior. We've all seen them. Some people are very good at this, and he absolutely trounced Sue Gray. She didn't even get a look in. Now, interestingly, if you remember, she was, as she was effectively sacked, she was given this job as the Prime Minister's envoy to the regions, wasn't it? Countries and regions, so Scotland, Wales and the regions. There's no sign of her taking that job up as far as I can see. People are beginning to wonder what's going on with Ms Gray.
Yeah, well, it was a real humiliation, wasn't it, for Sue Gray? And she was the Chief of Staff. She was the person who knew Whitehall. She was going to help navigate that transition between opposition and government. And within 100 days, she's gone. It's an absolute humiliation. It's a big demotion for a start. I wouldn't be surprised if she's not taking up a job, although I have no inside knowledge about that. But in any case, McSweeney won. He's now in complete charge as Chief of Staff. And, well, according to this report, at least, it looks like he's taking on Rayner, although I do think that would be kind of a dangerous thing for him to do because Starmer needs Angela Rayner on side. There's no doubt about that in my mind.
Yeah, but he's always had a difficult relationship with her. He worries that she kind of outshines him, that she's more interesting, which is true, garners more headlines, basically slightly jealous of the way she's able to move kind of effortlessly in the media scene, does quite well at it, and he's not very good at it. And we know that Morgan McSweeney has very much got Keir Starmer's ear. So I would say that Angela Rayner's got a battle on her hands.
She has indeed. You're absolutely right. They've always had this difficult relationship. She didn't vote for Keir Starmer in the leadership election of 2020. She voted for Rebecca Long-Bailey. And then, as you're...
Blimey, there's a name for the... Well, they used to call her Rebecca Wrong Daily, didn't they?
That's right.
But that's a name from the past. I've forgotten about her very existence.
Very much a Corbynite, you know. Rebecca Long-Bailey would have been continuity Corbyn. Of course, Starmer said he was going to be continuity Corbyn and then changed his mind. Very much McSweeney's guidance on that, by the way. So, absolutely right. Angela Rayner did not vote for Keir Starmer. Then Keir Starmer in 2021 tried to demote Angela Rayner. She fought back against that, made it basically impossible for him to do so. And now, of course... you know, she's highly respected in Labour circles. They love her among the membership. And my point would be, although she's so much more charismatic than Starmer, she has got this power base in Labour. It's very difficult for him just to suddenly go against Angela Rayner. And I think it could still be quite dangerous, even though she's a potential successor and threat to him.
Yeah, of course, Downing Street, I mean, behind that sort of relatively small facade, there's this sort of TARDIS-like massive office operation. And, of course, it's politics, it's Westminster. I mean, things have never been particularly harmonious at number 10, but they can get so... argumentative there that the whole place can become dysfunctional. People talked about that during Boris's day in particular, and people are talking about it a lot under Starmer, that part of the reason that his first 100 days and indeed successive days have been so disastrous is he has a dysfunctional Downing Street in which everyone's at war with each other.
Yeah, and part of the reason they tried to put all the control in McSweeney's hands was to try and change that, because what you had was Sue Gray and McSweeney both reporting into Keir Starmer, both trying to get his ear, and it became very fractious and very argumentative. So McSweeney's won that battle. The trouble is, McSweeney is not a great organiser. He's a great sort of insurgent. He calls himself an insurgent. He loves to see himself as a fighter for unpopular causes at the time. He's not a great organiser. So I think it's a bit of a gamble for McSweeney to be made Chief of Staff. He may not be the most natural for that particular role. Yeah,
what I've heard about him, or the common narrative about him, is that he's a political force, that he sort of talked politics with Starmer and said, this is what Labour should be thinking about, this is the direction. That kind of a political strategist, but perhaps not a leader of men. Those are two very separate skills, I think.
Yeah, and apparently what's happened is they've brought in people under him who are reporting into McSweeney. They're the organisers. They're sort of organising him, sort of almost, he's delegating the organisation to them. But whether that will work is a different matter. And if the Telegraph report about an argument with Angela Rayner already is to be believed, well, he's not got off to the greatest of starts on that.
I'll tell you what he did last week, Robert, was he called a meeting of all, particularly the new Labour MPs, but most of the Labour backbenchers. And he told them, because there's a lot of newbies there, you know, who are, shall we say, rather snowflakey. They're squeamish about some of the nastier issues that you have to confront when you're an MP, such as the migrant crisis. And what we've had from Labour, from the top to the bottom, ever since they came into power, is essentially a wall of silence. Nothing has been said about this very pressing issue that is very concerning to millions of fed-up Brits. They were sick to death of the Tories doing nothing about it, but at least the the Tories talked about it from time to time. What Morgan McSweeney said to the backbenchers, he said, you've got to start talking to your constituents about this. You've got to start confronting this issue. And unless you get real about the migrant crisis, talk to people about it, talk about Labour's plans, be realistic about it, keep it in the open, be transparent about it. He said, we will lose the next election to Reform UK. I think very good advice, very smart advice on McSweeney's part, but I think I'm not sure he's extended the same instructions to Keir Starmer and the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper, who I can't remember mentioning, neither of whom I can remember mentioning the migrant crisis for weeks. This is a tremendous abrogation of their duty.
I'd absolutely agree with you on all those points, Kevin. McSweeney understands the voters, and he claims, and I think he probably does understand, why people are drawn towards reform, why people are worried about migration. And what he's saying to Labour is, you mustn't demonise these people. You mustn't just tell people they're wrong for having concerns about illegal migration and indeed legal migration. These are legitimate concerns, and we have to have a Labour solution to them. That's what he will be thinking and saying. He's right, but will those Labour politicians listen? Because that's not what they believe.
Yeah, exactly right. They don't particularly want to solve the migrant crisis. And I think in many respects they're following their leader. Keir Starmer just never mentions the migrant crisis anymore, and nor does Yvette Cooper, because their border security command is a standing embarrassment, a complete and utter disaster, has not remotely smashed any people smuggling gangs whatsoever, and it's the wrong strategy anyway. Everybody knows to smash the people smuggling gangs will not solve the migrant crisis. To solve the migrant crisis, you have to work out a way to stop the migrants. End of. Now, in their inertia, in their hopelessness, in their no doubt private understanding that they just don't know what to do about this. This is what Starmer does about issues he finds difficult, issues that don't put him in a good light. He essentially sticks his fingers in his ears and he goes, la, 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 la. He acts like it's not happening. And Cooper, Yvette Cooper, Calamity Cooper, whose job it is to preside over the migrant crisis and to perhaps solve it, she's even worse than Starmer, hasn't mentioned it for, I think, maybe over a month. It's a disgrace, really.
Well, again, it just shows how much easier it is to play student politics when you are in opposition and say things like, we'll smash the gangs, it'll solve everything. And, of course, the harsh reality of government is it doesn't work like that. On day one, they closed the Rwanda scheme. Now, you could argue that about the Rwanda scheme, whether it was workable, but at least it was an attempt at disincentivizing. What we're getting now is more and more boats coming across, more and more people losing their lives. Isn't it something like 50 or 60 people?
So I think I totted it up last week. I think I'm right in saying I think it's 55 have died this year. 3 more died last week. I mean, with monotonous regularity, we get hundreds coming over every day, but lots are dying as well. So it really seems to me it's an imperative of this government to do something about it. And yet, in Starmer's time-honoured fashion, he just runs away from an issue that he finds difficult and awkward. It's not on, is it?
It is certainly not. He can't get away with that. And the voters will make it clear that he can't get away with that. And if McSweeney's worried about people going to reform, Starmer's going to have to start thinking about the illegal migration crisis, and he's going to have to realise that smashing the gangs as a slogan isn't enough.
I'll tell you, I'm going to leave you with a bit of gossip you might have heard yourself, and I'm not betraying any confidences. Rod Little told me this at the beginning of the show, that he's been hearing on the Westminster gossip grapevine that Starmer is extremely dismayed by his start. He now feels that he's not really up to this job and is thinking of throwing in the towel. I mean, that is extreme Westminster gossip, but pretty good. And, hey, fingers crossed, eh?
Fingers crossed from those of us who don't particularly rate Keir Starmer, but it's a lot more difficult being Prime Minister than he thought.
Yeah, indeed. By the way, last point, Robert, did you see the fact that he has broken all records in achieving unprecedented unpopularity in his first 100 or so days? Gone from plus 11 points on the day of the election. He's now minus 38, so he's he's lost 49 points in 3 months. No one has ever come close to this. Tony Blair was not in negative equity when it came to his popularity rating for 3 years after 1997. Starmer's not only gone into negative equity in 3 months, he's plummeted into it and broken all records. Now, apart from the fact that he's clearly useless and politically is screwed up from day one. I mean, the winter fuel allowance, a political mistake of the century. So many own goals he's scored. But apart from that, do you think it's that there's something very unlikable about him? It's difficult to get in touch with him. He's an automaton without a personality. Do you think that's a factor in it?
I definitely do. I mean, his lack of the common touch, his lack of any sort of political charisma is a real problem. An even bigger problem is that he turned on the Tories and said they're incompetent, they lack integrity, and he's been found out, I'm afraid, on both those questions, competence and probity and integrity in the first 100 days of his government. In other words, Kevin, he overpromised and he's under-delivered.
Absolutely. I'll leave you with a text I've had from a WhatsApp message from Daz in Carlisle. He says he's got a new drinking game. He's going to have a shot of tequila every time Rachel thieves, says £22 billion black hole in the finances. Well, poor old Daz is going to be drunk as a skunk in about 5 seconds flat. Robert, fantastic to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. Robert Taylor there, columnist at The Telegraph.